The world of European royalty often conjures images of polished pomp, rigid protocol, and carefully curated dignity. Yet, hidden beneath the opulent chandeliers and stoic oil portraits lies a cast of characters whose lives defy the stuffy stereotypes. Among them, one figure blazes like a rogue firework in a meticulously planned coronation: Ernest Augustus, King of Hanover. This was no cookie-cutter prince, content with ceremonial duties, or a demure royal fading into the background. Ernest was a storm of ambition, controversy, and unapologetic individuality, a man whose life could outshine the most sensational tabloid headlines. So, settle in with a metaphorical bucket of popcorn, because we're about to unravel the wild, multifaceted, and utterly captivating tale of a king who danced to a rhythm all his own. Ernest Augustus, born on June 5, 1771, at Buckingham House in London, was one such spare, the fifth son of King George III and Queen Charlotte. In the rigid hierarchy of royal succession, his place in the line suggested a future of ceremonial duties and quiet obscurity. But Ernest was no ordinary prince. With a fiery spirit and an unyielding drive, he refused to fade into the background, forging a path that was as tumultuous as it was remarkable. From his early education in Hanover to his battle-scarred military career, his ascent to political prominence, and the scandal that would forever mark his name, Ernest Augustus's early life was a whirlwind of ambition, adversity, and intrigue. As the fifth son in a family of 15 children, Ernest Augustus entered the world with little expectation of ever wearing the British crown. His elder brothers, George, the future George IV, Frederick, William, later William IV, and Edward, stood ahead of him in the line of succession, their roles as potential heirs securing the Hanoverian dynasty's future. In an era when royal children were often pawns in the game of dynastic alliances, Ernest's position as a backup's backup afforded him a degree of freedom uncommon among his siblings. Yet, this freedom came with a catch. Without a clear role, he was expected to carve out a purpose in a world that valued lineage over individuality. Buckingham House, the precursor to Buckingham Palace, was a bustling hub of royal activity, filled with the pomp and protocol of the Georgian court. Ernest's childhood was shaped by the strict upbringing typical of the time, with tutors drilling him in languages, history, and the classics. Queen Charlotte, a devoted but disciplinarian mother, ensured her children were prepared for their roles, however minor. Yet, even as a boy, Ernest displayed a restless energy that set him apart. Stories from the royal household describe a prince who was quick-witted, fiercely independent, and unafraid to challenge authority, a trait that would define his life. By his early teens, it was clear that Ernest's future lay not in the gilded salons of London, but in Hanover, the German electorate tied to the British crown through a personal union since 1714. The Hanoverian connection was more than a historical footnote. It was a vital part of the royal family's identity, and George III took a keen interest in preparing his sons to serve the electorate. At the age of 15, Ernest was sent to Hanover, a move that would shape his worldview and set the stage for his extraordinary career. In 1786, Ernest enrolled at the University of Göttingen, one of Europe's most prestigious institutions, located in the heart of Hanover. Founded by George II, the university was a beacon of Enlightenment thought, attracting scholars from across the continent. For a young royal, it was an unconventional choice. Most princes of the era relied on private tutors rather than formal academic institutions. Yet, Ernest thrived in this environment. Far from the distracted dilettante one might expect, he proved a diligent and intellectually curious student, mastering German with astonishing speed. His fluency in the language allowed him to immerse himself in Hanoverian culture, forging a deep connection to the land that would later become his kingdom. Göttingen was more than a place of study. It was a crucible for Ernest's emerging identity. The university exposed him to the political and philosophical debates of the day, from the ideals of the Enlightenment to the growing tensions of revolutionary Europe. His professors noted his sharp mind and quick grasp of complex ideas, qualities that would later serve him in both military and political arenas. Yet, academia alone could not contain his restless ambition. Hanover was a militarized state, its armies a key component of the British Hanoverian alliance, and Ernest was eager to prove himself as a man of action. In 1791, at the age of 20, Ernest began his military training under the tutelage of Field Marshal Wilhelm von Freytag, a seasoned commander in the Hanoverian army. Freytag recognized the young prince's potential, schooling him in the art of cavalry warfare, a demanding discipline that required precision, courage, and physical endurance. Ernest's ascent through the ranks was nothing short of meteoric. Appointed a lieutenant in the Hanoverian army, he was promoted to captain within just 2 months, a testament to his natural aptitude and relentless determination. His rapid rise was not merely a product of royal privilege. Contemporaries described him as a disciplined officer who led by example, earning the respect of his men through sheer grit. By 1792, Ernest's military career took him to the front lines of the First Coalition War against revolutionary France. Appointed colonel of the 9th Light Dragoons, he plunged into the chaos of combat, leading cavalry charges through the muddy fields of Flanders. This was no ceremonial role. Ernest was in the thick of battle, his life on the line alongside his soldiers. The war against France was a brutal affair, pitting the monarchies of Europe against a revolutionary state driven by ideological fervor. For Ernest, it was a chance to prove his mettle and escape the shadow of his royal birth. The battlefield, however, was unforgiving. In August 1793, during a skirmish near Tournai, a French saber slashed across Ernest's face, leaving a jagged scar that would forever alter his appearance. In an era when royal portraits were a currency of public admiration, the injury was more than physical. It marked him as a warrior, but also set him apart from the polished image expected of a prince. The scar became a symbol of his willingness to risk everything for duty, a badge of honor that he wore with defiant pride. Less than a year later, at the Battle of Tourcoing in May 1794, Ernest faced even greater trauma. A barrage of enemy fire left his left arm mangled and his left eye permanently impaired, robbing him of full vision. The injuries were severe, forcing him to withdraw from the front and return to England in June 1794 for a grueling recovery. The physical toll was immense, but Ernest's spirit remained unbroken. His letters from this period reveal a man determined to reclaim his place in the world, refusing to let his wounds define him. By November 1795, his resilience was rewarded with a promotion to Major General, a remarkable achievement for a man still in his mid-20s. The rank was a recognition of his courage and leadership, but it also underscored the paradox of his position. Ernest was a royal prince, yet he had earned his stripes through blood and sacrifice, not merely birthright. His hunger for action remained unquenched, but his injuries and the shifting tides of war forced a temporary pause. Eager to rejoin the Allied forces, he was instead assigned to minor roles in Hanover, positions he later dismissed as of no great consequence. For a man who thrived on challenge, this enforced idleness was a bitter pill, chafing like a poorly fitted uniform. Yet, these setbacks only deepened his resolve to carve out a legacy beyond the battlefield. On April 23, 1799, King George III bestowed upon Ernest a trio of titles that would redefine his place in the British aristocracy: Duke of Cumberland and Teviotdale, Earl of Armagh, and an annual allowance of £12,000, equivalent to roughly £1.2 million in modern terms. These honors transformed him from a peripheral prince into a prominent figure, granting him wealth, status, and a platform to pursue his ambitions. Now, styled the Duke of Cumberland, Ernest turned his gaze to a new arena: the cutthroat world of British politics. Promoted to lieutenant general in both the British and Hanoverian armies, Ernest chose to remain in England, where he immersed himself in the House of Lords. The Lords was a bastion of privilege and power, where peers shaped the nation's laws and debated the great issues of the day. Ernest aligned himself with the High Tory faction, a group of staunch conservatives who championed tradition, monarchy, and the established Church of England. His political persona was as bold as his military one, marked by a fervor that bordered on zealotry. He quickly became a leading voice of Tory orthodoxy, advocating for policies that preserved the status quo and resisted the tides of reform sweeping through Britain. Ernest's most polarizing stance was his fierce opposition to Catholic emancipation, the movement to grant political rights to Catholics in the United Kingdom. At the time, Catholics were barred from holding public office or sitting in Parliament, a relic of centuries-old religious tensions. Ernest argued that lifting these restrictions would violate the king's coronation oath to uphold the Anglican faith, a position rooted in both personal conviction and political strategy. His stance resonated with Protestant hardliners, particularly in Ireland, where anti-Catholic sentiment ran deep. In 1805, he was elected Chancellor of the University of Dublin, a Protestant stronghold, and in 1807, he became Grand Master of the Orange Lodges, fraternal organizations dedicated to Protestant ascendancy. These roles cemented his status as a champion of Protestantism, but they also made him a lightning rod for reformers who saw him as an obstacle to progress. Ernest's political battles kept him in the public eye, but it was his personal life that truly captivated and scandalized the nation. No event was more notorious than the Celis incident of 1810, a dark and mysterious episode that would haunt him for decades. On the night of May 31st, Ernest was attacked in his bedchamber at St. James's Palace. An assailant, armed with a blade, inflicted severe wounds before fleeing into the night. The attack left Ernest bloodied and shaken, his life spared by mere inches. Hours later, his valet, Joseph Celis, was found dead in his room, his throat cut in what appeared to be a gruesome suicide. The official inquest moved swiftly, concluding that Celis had attacked Ernest in a fit of madness before taking his own life. The explanation was tidy, but the public was far from convinced. London's coffee houses, taverns, and drawing rooms buzzed with speculation, each rumor more lurid than the last. Some whispered that Ernest and Celis had been entangled in a clandestine affair, with Celis's death staged to cover up blackmail or betrayal. Others suggested that Ernest himself had orchestrated the valet's murder to silence a dangerous secret. The lack of transparency, combined with Ernest's reputation for secrecy and his already polarizing persona, fueled a narrative of suspicion and intrigue. No concrete evidence supported the wilder claims, but the damage was done. The Celis incident transformed Ernest from a controversial duke into a figure of Gothic mystery, his name synonymous with scandal. Pamphlets and caricatures circulated, depicting him as a sinister mastermind or a debauched libertine. For a man already at odds with reformers and distrusted by much of the public, the incident was a devastating blow to his reputation. Yet, Ernest refused to retreat. With characteristic defiance, he pressed on, determined to shape his legacy on his own terms, even as the whispers of scandal followed him like a shadow. Ernest's knack for controversy followed him into 1813 with the Weymouth controversy. Accused of improperly influencing a parliamentary election in Weymouth, he found himself at odds with the unwritten rule that royals should steer clear of electoral meddling. The scandal prompted a strategic retreat to Europe, where he served as an observer during the Napoleonic Wars, witnessing the decisive Allied victory at the Battle of Leipzig in October 1813. His military credentials were further burnished with a promotion to Field Marshal on November 26, 1813, but his political missteps in England lingered. Amid these tempests, Ernest found solace in love, a love that was, predictably, anything but conventional. In 1815, he married his first cousin, Princess Frederica of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. Royal cousin marriages were common, but Frederica's past added a layer of scandal. She had previously been betrothed to Ernest's younger brother Adolphus before breaking off the engagement. Queen Charlotte, Ernest's mother, was fiercely opposed to the match, viewing Frederica as unsuitable. Defiant, Ernest proceeded with the marriage, and by all accounts, the union was a genuinely happy one. However, his requests for an increased parliamentary allowance to support his new household were repeatedly denied, a reflection of his tarnished reputation and lingering resentment over the Weymouth affair. The royal family's succession took a dramatic turn in 1817 with the death of Princess Charlotte of Wales, the only legitimate grandchild of George III. Her passing triggered a succession crisis, prompting the unmarried royal dukes to scramble for wives to produce heirs. Ernest and Frederica, already married, moved to Germany in 1818, partly to escape Queen Charlotte's disapproval and partly due to the lower cost of living. In 1819, Frederica gave birth to their son, Prince George of Cumberland, securing Ernest's line. When George III died in 1820, Ernest found himself fourth in line to the British throne, a remarkable shift for a spare who had once seemed destined for obscurity. In England, Ernest's political influence waned under the reigns of George IV and William IV. He remained a vocal opponent of progressive reforms, notably the Reform Act of 1832, which modernized Britain's electoral system, and the Roman Catholic Relief Act of 1829, which he saw as a betrayal of Protestant principles. His personal life continued to attract gossip, including baseless claims that he had fathered illegitimate children, such as Thomas Garth, the son of his sister Sophia. The 1830 suicide of Lord Graves, following insinuations of an affair between Ernest and Lady Graves, further stoked rumors of Ernest's involvement in dark deeds. Historians suggest these scandals were amplified by his Whig rivals, who saw Ernest's conservatism as a threat. The turning point in Ernest's life came on June 20th, 1837, with the death of William IV. William's niece, Victoria, ascended the British throne, but in Hanover, the Salic law barred women from ruling. As the senior male heir, Ernest became King of Hanover, severing the personal union between Britain and Hanover that had persisted since 1714. At 66, Ernest was finally a monarch in his own right, and he embraced the role with characteristic vigor. Upon arriving in Hanover, Ernest wasted no time asserting his authority. He dissolved the Hanoverian Parliament, suspended the liberal 1833 Constitution, and reinstated the more conservative 1819 Constitution, citing the lack of his consent for the newer document. This bold move sparked outrage among liberals, but solidified his control. His next act, the Göttingen 7 incident, further defined his reign. Demanding that all officials, including university professors, swear a new oath of allegiance, Ernest faced defiance from 7 Göttingen professors, including the renowned Brothers Grimm. When they refused, he fired them and expelled 3 from Hanover, earning condemnation across Europe for his autocratic stance. Despite his authoritarian tendencies, Ernest's reign in Hanover was not without progress. He championed urban development, overseeing the introduction of gaslighting, improved sanitation, and new residential districts in Hanover City. A fervent advocate for railways, he transformed Hanover into a key rail hub, boosting its economy. In a departure from his British conservatism, he opened senior government posts to all social classes, appointed Catholics to official roles, and granted equal rights to Jews, policies that contrasted sharply with his earlier opposition to Catholic emancipation. Ernest's foreign policy was equally pragmatic. He supported postal and currency unions among German states, but resisted the Prussian-led Zollverein customs union, wary of Prussia's growing influence. His foresight proved prescient. Hanover joined the Zollverein in 1850 under favorable terms, but it was absorbed by Prussia in 1866, 15 years after his death. The revolutions of 1848 tested Ernest's rule, but Hanover remained relatively stable. When protests arose, he threatened to return to England, a bluff that quelled unrest. Bowing to public pressure, he granted a more liberal constitution than the 1819 version, demonstrating a rare willingness to compromise. Ernest's relationship with Queen Victoria, his niece, was fraught with tension. He refused to vacate his apartments at St. James's Palace, despite Victoria's requests, and clashed with her husband, Prince Albert, over matters of precedence. At the 1843 wedding of Princess Augusta of Cambridge, Ernest's attempt to outrank Albert was met with a firm push from the prince, settling the dispute with physicality rather than protocol. The two monarchs also quarreled over Queen Charlotte's jewels, which Ernest claimed as the male heir, while Victoria insisted they belonged to the British crown. The dispute outlived Ernest, with the jewels awarded to Hanover in 1858. In his later years, Ernest remained active, traveling across Germany and celebrating his 80th birthday in 1851 with a torchlight procession in Göttingen, a testament to his enduring popularity in Hanover. Ever the contrarian, he dismissed London's Great Exhibition of 1851 as folly and absurdity, a jab at Victoria's modernizing vision. On November 18, 1851, Ernest died at 80 after a month-long illness. His death was mourned deeply in Hanover, where he was seen as a stabilizing force. But in Britain, his scandal-laden past and conservative views left a more ambivalent legacy. Ernest and Frederica were laid to rest in a mausoleum in Hanover's Herrenhausen Gardens. A grand equestrian statue of Ernest, inscribed, "To the Father of the Country from his loyal people," stands in Hanover's Central Station Square, a tribute to his transformative reign. Even Britain's The Times, long critical of his tenure as Duke of Cumberland, praised his stewardship of Hanover, noting its stability during the 1848 revolutions. Ernest Augustus was no fairy tale prince, nor did he aspire to be. He was a soldier scarred by war, a politician who courted controversy, a husband devoted to a scandal-tinged love, and a king who ruled with both an iron fist and a vision for progress. His life was a tapestry of contradictions, conservative yet pragmatic, scandalous yet steadfast, polarizing yet undeniably impactful. In an era of polished royals, Ernest marched to his own drum, leaving a legacy as bold and unforgettable as the man himself. If history loves a good story, then Ernest Augustus delivered one for the ages.